The people finally have the power, the historical timeline of the Great Fraud, and how to deal with it. Excellent compilation. Author unknown. Redesigned April 2025. An Affidavit of Truth. Historical proof of the corruption of crimes for commerce against you, including personage, peonage, barratry, fraud, slavery, involuntary servitude, unlawful conversion, and even false charges and false imprisonment. Profits beyond your wildest dreams. Cognitive dissonance. And sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It creates a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable, called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit in with that core belief. The people finally have the power. Britain is owned by the Vatican. Treaty of 1213. 1215. The Magna Charta, promise of the king giving power and rights to the people. The Global Estate Trusts, 1302. The Unam Sanctum, Pope Boniface VII creates the world's first and largest trust. 1455. The Romanus Pontifex, Pope Nicholas V publishes the First Testamentary Trust. 1481. The Attorney Regis, Pope Sixtus IV publishes the Second Testamentary Trust. 1537. The Convocation, Pope Paul II publishes the Third Testamentary Trust. What did these trusts do? Everything that affects us today. The global estate trusts each set a different jurisdiction. The jurisdiction of the land. All resources of the land, people, animals, plants, minerals, are national in nature. Control was given to the Spanish king, and later it was given to the people of the world. The jurisdiction of the air, living and dead souls, spirits, angels, demons, ideas global in nature, including dead entities known as corporations. These are controlled by the Pope and his appointees. The jurisdiction of the water, sea, vessels, mariners, merchants, ports, shipping, international and commerce in nature controlled by British monarchs. The global estate trusts each set a different jurisdiction. Each jurisdiction has its own law form and language. Juris equal to law, diction equal to words. Law words equal to the words you choose determines the type of law and jurisdiction you're under. Legalese equal to language game or type of law to words, which determine jurisdiction, or type of law that you're ruled by. Law equal to land, air, water. Land equal to self-governed, common, equity. Air equal to ecclesiastical, trust. Water equal to admiralty, contract. The Global Estate Trust operates by providing services. The empire of the Global Estate Trusts has 4 administrative heads, or independent city-nation states. 1. Rome Vatican Inc. is the corporate headquarters, and the owner of souls. Roman Curia. 2. Westminster Inc. London is the legal and banking or comptroller of the law and finance headquarters. United States Inc. District of Columbia is the headquarters of Police and Military Defense Services Corp. 4. United Nations Inc. New York and Hague is trade, treaty, negotiation, and human resources, including labor welfare services. Their goal, they say, and private investment for public advancement. Government pays the military that protects commercial interests that in turn funds the government. New York City is defined in the federal regulations as the United Nations. Rudolph Giuliani stated on C-SPAN that New York City was the capital of the world, and he was correct. 20 CFR Chapter 111, Subpart B 422.103. 2. Prerogatives of the Crown. The Common Law of England 73 is known by the various appellations of right, common right, public right, and communia justitia. The French call their municipal law droit, which signifies right. In the Stat. of Westminster 2d Cap. 1. The common law is called common droit, and in Magna Charta it is called rectum. W. And therefore, when it is said that a man has a thing of common right, it is always to be understood that he has it by the common law. And it is further held, that the common law is called common right, Because it is the best and most common birthright that the subject hath for the safeguard and defense not only of goods, lands, and revenues, but of his wife and children, his body, fame, and life also, are an act of Parliament, made against common right, is void and impossible to be performed. Why? For the law is reason and equity to do right to all, and to preserve men from wrong and mischief, and will never make construction against law, equity, and right, equal to the rule being legis constructio nunquam facit injuriam. And herein, says Sir Edward Coke, the excellency of the common law is to be observed. America, upon these shores, I shall live, or here shall I die ashore free. Stephen Hopkins, a Bermuda castaway in 1606, a Jamestown survivor in 1607, and a Mayflower pilgrim in 1620. 1607. Jamestown, Virginia, the common law is set upon these shores. The law of the land. 1620 Mayflower Compact, Plymouth Rock, the first government is instituted upon these shores. The historical timeline pieces of the puzzle. 1666, the Sestuikevi Act of 1666. The Great Fire of London creates the occasion for the creation of individual public trusts as a government means of seizing private property. 1702, the British Crown and Dutch East India Company collude under the Maritime Wagering Act. Living men are deemed to be vessels and insured. Their death loss becomes a means of enrichment for the commercial corporations and the British government. 1765, the pollution of English common law with admiralty law to create equity law, and granting absolute power to the judiciary to seize upon and distribute private property, comes to fruition in England under Lord Mansfield. The historical timeline pieces of the puzzle. July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence, standing up to authority and against tyranny, and declaring our liberty. Every single American at this moment in time has more authority on the land than the entire government. Life's good. 1783, the Treaty of Peace, promising friendship and amity in perpetuity. One of the most important documents. 1789, the organic, original Constitution for the United States of America. Bill of Rights. No titles of nobility shall hold office. We are Americans, we are free, we are civil, and we are at peace. A compact between sovereign nation-states forming a union for the provision of 19 essential governmental services, and no more. I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves, and if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power. Thomas Jefferson Letter to William Charles Jarvis, September 28. Terroros.com. The historical timeline pieces of the puzzle war of 1812. America standing up to authority again. Against both England and France. 1815. To protect our trading ships from Muslim pirates and other privateers we sign, the Treaty of Ghent, with England giving up control of our seas and inland navigable waterways. 1819. The American states passed the Titles of Nobility Amendment to the original Constitution, putting teeth and penalties into earlier provisions, effectively prohibiting members of the bar associations from holding any public offices. November 22, 1822. The Secret Treaty of Verona is the basis of the Monroe Doctrine. It throws a powerful white light upon the conflict between the historical timeline pieces of the puzzle. 1837, the British Settlement Act sets aside public wastelands as commonwealth, and paupers are said to be settled upon this land, thus becoming wards of the state. This effectively prevents the lower classes from ever being landlords, and provides a basis for claiming them as chattel property. 1848, Karl Marx, The Communist Manifesto. Changing the minds of the elite bankers and those who want to rule others rather than live free. 1858. Benjamin Disraeli begins the push to enfranchise British labourers as properties belonging to the British Crown. They and their assets are seized upon in the process as collateral backing government debt. Their voluntary enslavement is used to fund the British Raj in India, though they are never told any of this. Abraham Lincoln, the beginning of the end of the Republic. 1860, after failing 6 times, Abe Lincoln, a bar attorney with the backing of the wealthy big businesses and bankers of Chicago, Boston, New York and Philadelphia, finally is elected president. He can serve only in the private office of President of the United States Trading Company, not as President of the United States of America, as a result of the Titles of Nobility Amendment. He contrives to start the Civil War, which is never declared by Congress. May of 1860. The U.S. Congress passed the Morrill Tariff Bill, named for Republican congressman and steel manufacturer, Justin S. Morrill of Vermont, raising the average tariff from about 15% to 37%, with increases to 47% within 3 years. Lincoln. The beginning of the end of the Republic. March 27, 1861. 7 southern states pull from the Union fighting over the huge tax increases of the Morrill Tariff Act. 11 delegates from the 7 southern states walk out. This leaves Congress sine die, without a quorum, and no functioning government existed. With no government to run, Abe started using for the first time in history executive powers. 1862. Abe's Congress, a de facto board of directors, changes the meaning of the word person to mean operation. Abraham Lincoln. Civil War was not about slavery. And will say then, that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races, that I am not, nor ever have been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people, and I will say in addition to this that, there is a physical difference between the white and black races from living together on terms of social and political equality, and inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior and inferior, and I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. The Collected Works of Abraham Lincoln. Roy Basler, ed. 1953, New Brunswick, N.J., Rutgers University Press. Lincoln's Views on Race. Abraham Lincoln. The Beginning of the End of the Republic. 1863. With his first few executive orders, he bankrupted the original and organic, the United States of America, and its trading companies. And then he incorporated the United States of America as a Delaware corporation. A look-alike, sound-alike fraud. April 24, 1863. With Executive Order 100th, the Lieber Code places the Grand Army of the Republic in charge of the government. He contrives to start the Civil War, which is never declared by Congress. He put the nation under martial rule, which was never rescinded, making himself the commander-in-chief and placing the government of me the people under military occupation, officially ending the Republic. Thus, through the communistic acts of a new president, civil war was declared. And the Republic died. 1863. United Postal Network UPN, Bern, Switzerland. This is the architects and surveyors hired to set up the addressing system of the NWO. Now owns and controls the United States Postal Service, USPS. The destruction of the Republic continues. 1865. Lee surrenders his army to Grant at Appomattox, but no official peace treaty is ever signed. The southern states are carved up into 10 military districts, and all the original states are improperly subsumed into the bankruptcy of the United States Trading Company by a process of assumpsit. 1865. Lincoln is murdered by John Wilkes Booth. Andrew Jackson becomes president of the new democracy. The southern states are in ruins and under military occupation. The northern states are bankrupt. Andrew Jackson declares peace upon the land, May 10, 1865, again April 2, 1866, and again August 20, 1866, urging Congress to do so. But Congress land or sea. The destruction of the Republic continues. Together both the 39th and 40th Congress violated the Constitution of America in 6 different but very dramatically important ways. 1. Article 5, Section 5, was violated as shown by the House Journal. March 3, 1866, page 353. 2. Article 2, Section 3, was violated by the Reconstruction Acts of 1867. 3. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3 was violated by the Reconstruction Acts of 1867. 4. Article 4, Section 4 was violated by the Reconstruction Act's denial of a Republican form of government to the southern states after the armistice. 5. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 was violated by the 39th Congress unlawfully exercising exclusive legislation outside their district and allowed federal enclaves. 6. Article 4, Section 3, was violated when the 39th Congress formed unlawful de facto and federal states and within the organic states of the Union to operate as franchises of the United States of America Inc. Inc. So Oregon and state became the state of Oregon, etc. The destruction of the Republic continues. The corporate Congress acting as officers of a de facto, private for-profit governmental services corporation, and not the de jure government of the people. With the Reconstruction Acts of 1867, Congress created military districts and special admiralty courts. Gold-fringed captured war flag to deal with the remaining Inch rebels still at large. This is not addressed or allowed under any constitution. 1868. The corporate Congress published its new look-alike sound-alike, the Constitution for the United States of America, replacing the original organic the Constitution for the United States of America. This new and entirely different document is used as articles and bylaws of a de facto commercial corporation. There was no need for any ratification of amendments by any date states created as franchises of the parent company, so Secretary of State William Seward simply declared the new 13th and 14th Amendments unratified. Mere lip service was given to the process by the states, except for Oregon, who wrote a letter, 1868 to 1875. This new government entity then forces the original unincorporated state governments to write new state constitutions, and to assume new doing businesses names in the form of Wisconsin State, Connecticut State, and so on, while seizing upon the name of the original states, and operating a territorial franchises for itself under their names, State of Wisconsin, State of Connecticut, and so on. All these semantic deceits are pulled off on the trusting public via look-alike, sound-alike, fraud. The destruction of the Republic continues. The District. 1871. The District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871 created a municipal corporation to govern the District of Columbia. Considering the fact that the first municipal government itself was incorporated in 1808 in London, an Organic Act, which means a first act, using the term a municipal corporation. In 1870, one can only mean a private corporation owned by the municipality, or the District of Columbia. Hereinafter we will call that private corporation, Corp. U.S. By consistent usage Corp. U.S. trademark the name, United States Government, referring to themselves. The District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871 places Congress in control like a corporate board, and gives the purpose of the act to form a governing body over the municipality. This allowed Congress to direct the business needs of the government under the existent martial rule, and provided them with corporate abilities they would not otherwise have. This was done under the constitutional authority for Congress to pass any law within the 10-mile square of the District of Columbia, known as the District of Columbia Corporation. The destruction of the Republic continues. 1871. The corporation is ratified 28 U.S.C. 3002-15. A. United States equal to federal corporation, equal to commercial corporation doing business as United States. The corporate 13th Amendment frees the black slaves, and then 14th Amendment creates all persons. C. 1862 as U.S. citizens and specifically disenfranchises American state citizens and extends federal to territorial jurisdiction, or admiralty to the 10 states. 2nd of February, 1871, 41st Congress, 3rd Session, Chapters 62, 63, 64, 65. The Congress declares itself to be the successor of all United States corporations, and the property of all said corporations. They claim to own every corporation in America that was formed under the U.S. auspices. And that is why they incorporate the United Nations Corporation, and some of its major corporate agencies. Manta.com is a website for obtaining data on corporations. If the names of any of these government entities are entered, then you will find that virtually all of them are listed as private for-profit corporations. You will also see in the aggregate valuations of their assets that Manta.com provides is vastly greater than what is listed in these private government corporations' fraudulent but well-publicized budget documents that seek to justify fraudulent budget cuts, and their related, tax-based extortion rackets. This confirms that many hundred billions, trillions of dollars of the people's money listed in the semi-secret government comprehensive annual financial reports, CAFRs as government institutional investments are being siphoned off by the global banking cartel, and those sinister forces behind it. This is real fact. Here's an example, in real time, how a state of Wisconsin corporation subsidiary University of Wisconsin hid a $1 billion. In the Federal Reserve, CAFR1.com/wisconsin.html. CAFR. One note. Wisconsin State University is but a pebble on the beach. All of the state universities do the same, and have been doing so for decades. In many a case those other much larger state universities. If the stashes were identified, they are much larger rocks or boulders on the beach. Wisconsin CAFR looked at $1 billion. Billion. Pebble on the beach identified. Now in other states start identifying those rocks and boulders. The destruction of the republic continues. Constitutional lawful bloodline American Republic versus British democratic citizen. The federal constitution makes a careful distinction between natural-born citizens and citizens of the United States. Compare in the Constitution, 215, with the so-called 14th Amendment Section 1-2. One is an unconditional sovereign by natural birth, who is endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. The other has been granted the revocable privileges of U.S. citizenship, endowed by the Congress of the United States. When one is a citizen, the other is a subject. One is a sovereign, the other is a subordinate. One is a citizen of our constitutional republic. The other is a citizen of a legislative democracy, the federal zone. Notice the superior subordinate relationship between these two statuses. I don't know how many can hear or comprehend this, but we lawful bloodline Americans stand strong, we stand our ground, we stand for our rights. Standing is strength. Standing is a sign of a breathing living man and woman, a living souls. A legal person equal to a legal fiction, equal to U.S. citizen, acts of Congress. One of the terms used predominantly by the present civil governments and courts in America is a legal person. Just what is a legal person? Some definitions are, legal person, a body of persons, or an entity as a corporation, considered as having many of the rights and responsibilities of a natural person, and especially the capacity to sue and be sued. Merriam-Webster's Dictionary of Law, 1996. Person. First, a human being, a natural person. 2. A corporation. An artificial person. Corporations are treated as persons in many legal situations. Also, the word "our person" includes corporations in most definitions in this dictionary. 3. Any other being, entitled to sue as a legal entity, a government, an association, a group of trustees, etc. 4. The plural of person is persons, not people, see that word. Oren's A Dictionary of the Law, West Group 1999. Person. An entity with legal rights in existence, including the ability to sue and be sued, to sign contracts, to receive gifts, to appear in court either by themselves or by lawyer, and generally, other powers incidental to the full expression of the entity in law. Individuals are persons, in law, unless they are minors, or under some kind of other incapacity such as a court finding of mental incapacity. Many laws give certain powers to persons, which, in almost all instances, includes business organizations that have been formally registered such as partnerships, corporations or associations. Duhame's Law Dictionary. Person, noun. Person. Latin persona, said to be compounded of per, through or by, and sonus, sound. A Latin word signifying primarily a mask used by actors on the stage. Webster's 1828 Dictionary. The destruction of the Republic continues. 1900 to 1904. The Insular Tariff Cases, a series of Supreme Court cases, giving Congress permission to create a separate nation using the federal territories and possessions as to port states, Guam, Puerto Rico. American Samoa and others became a union of states known as the United States of America Minor from then on. Congress began referring to this entity as if it were referring to the continental United States. Jan 4, 5-6, 1906. Hale vs. Henkel. 201 U.S. 43, Supra 74. 75, 1905, tells all. An individual state citizen has unalienable constitutional rights, while a U.S. citizen, a creature of the tight state, has privileges and civil rights, and is held subject to all policies, rules, codes and statutes, the same as any other public servant. Upheld over 1,600 times by both the district and the Supreme Courts. 1907, the 1868 version of the United States of America Inc. is bankrupted. The land of the actual states and people is unlawfully seized upon by the creditors of the United States of America Inc. as collateral backing its debts in bankruptcy. Title 10 is taken to the land, and the actual patents seized upon, with the creditors receiving the equitable title and benefit. 1912, a group of mostly European banking interests, the League of Nations precursor to the United Nations, and a few American traders like J.P. Morgan and Woodrow Wilson's Edward Mandel House meets on Jekyll Island, and forms the Federal Reserve, called that so people would believe it was part of their government, when in reality it's about as federal as FedEx. Yet, just another look-alike sound-alike fraud. Evil rarely looks evil until it accomplishes its goal. It gains entrance by appearing attractive, desirable, and perfectly legitimate. It is a baited and camouflaged trap. The destruction of the Republic continues. The Great Fraud. 1913, all hospitals are declared foundling hospitals. A pregnant mother goes in to have a child. She is undeclared, indigent. The child is undeclared, abandoned and birthed as a vessel, and adopted by the state. The child is registered as human resources. A certificate of bond is issued, and everyone gets a number. Definition: foundling, one, an abandoned child, left by its parents, often a baby left at a church, convent, hospital, or similar safe place, and the primary control and custody of infant is with the government. Tillman vs. Roberts. 108 so. 62. Prior to 1913, most Americans owned clear, allodial title to their property, free and clear of any liens of mortgages, until the Federal Reserve Act, 1913, hypothecated all property within the federal United States to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, in which the trustees' stockholders held legal title. The U.S. citizen tenant franchisee was registered as a beneficiary of the trust via his/her birth certificate, and then later his SS. Prior to 1913, there was no income tax. So, how did we run government? The income tax is installed. The IRS is created out of Puerto Rico and a division, or as a subsidiary of the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms. It is set up as the private and collection agency for the newly created privately owned, mostly foreign-owned, Federal Reserve Corporation. The income tax was designed to pay the interest on funds borrowed from the Federal Reserve Corporation. The destruction of the Republic continues. The Federal Reserve. On December 23, 1913, taking advantage of the absence of congressmen opposed to the creation of a fiat monetary system during the Christmas break, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. President Woodrow Wilson and Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act and established their fiat currency, to be used by the U.S. and its franchise corporations as legal tender, and designed to trap Americans into eternal indebtedness, in a practice politely called deficit spending. Other terms which would aptly describe the practice include counterfeiting and uncheck kiting. But it all comes down to the same thing: spending money one does not actually have. Legal tender equal to Federal Reserve note, equal to not money, equal to does not pay off debt but instead tenders it to a later date. Each FRN costs 4 to print and distribute and is traded 1 for all real money, gold, silver in circulation. Profit to bank face value of bill, 0.04 plus interest. And the bankers profited. Again, side note. In 2009, the Federal Reserve transferred the bulk of its assets to a new entity under the UN, doing business as the Federal Reserve Inc., doing business as the United States Inc., bankrupting the old entity and leaving helpless U.S. citizens to pay their national debt. The destruction of the Republic continues. The Federal Reserve. In describing the Fed, Congressman Louis T. McFadden, who served 12 years as chairman of the Committee on Banking and Currency, remarked in the Congressional Record, House pages 1295 and 1296. On June 10, 1932, said, "And Mr. Chairman, we have in this country one of the most corrupt institutions the world has ever known. I refer to the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve Banks. The Federal Reserve Board, a government board, has cheated the government of the United States and the people of the United States out of enough money to pay the national debt. The depredations and the iniquities of the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve Banks acting together have cost this country enough money to pay the national debt several times over. This evil institution has impoverished and ruined the people of the United States, has bankrupted itself, and has practically bankrupted our government. It has done this through the misadministration of that law by which the Federal Reserve Board, and through the corrupt practices of the moneyed vultures who control it." 50. UFC 20. The destruction of the Republic continues. Fiat currency equal to monopoly money? 20. 0. 2. At least they have a sense of humor. 10. 10. 5. 9. The United States of T. 121-1. The destruction of the Republic continues. The War Powers of Lincoln continue. 1917. The War Powers Act, and the Emergency Act. Congress grants themselves power they never had, and they gratuitously unconscripted all the private property in America for the war effort. Meaning they borrowed everyone, men and women, and everything, all goods and services in America they needed for military use. 1917. The Trading with the Enemy Act. This makes U.S. citizens enemies of the federal government. However, in Section 21, it specifically excluded American state citizens from being classified as enemies. 1921. The Roaring Twenties. The Federal Reserve prints up a whole bunch of FRNs and unleashes them into the public, allowing hypothecation of debt, and people spent and enjoyed a lifestyle they never before in history had. October of 1929. The deliberate crash. The bankers abruptly stopped the money supply, shut down the banks. People could not pay their debts. As a result, the Federal Reserve member banks put their competitors out of business, bought up massive amounts of real estate for pennies, and hired laborers to do their bidding for nearly nothing, and the bankers profited. Yet again, hence, the Great Depression occurred, and many thousands committed suicide. The destruction of the Republic continues. Quotes of Woodrow Wilson. Prior to 1912, since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the U.S., in the field of commerce and manufacturing, are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it, or fear for their lives. 1921, in his final speech as president. I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. Woodrow Wilson, 28th President of the United States. President. 1913-1921. The destruction of the Republic continues. Edward Mandell House, Woodrow Wilson's chief advisor who set up Federal Reserve, said, "Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer being unable to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever, by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value, designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure our plans, and, if by accident one or two should figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations, and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. The destruction of the Republic continues. Some history of the Pledge of Allegiance. 1887. George Belch wrote the first pledge. His version read, "Can we give our heads and hearts to God, and then our country, one language, one flag." God was first and foremost. 1892, Francis Bellamy, a registered communist and schoolteacher, was hired to rewrite the official Pledge of Allegiance, using the word "bemoranwarranty" to make it personally ingrained so as to give a personal legal consent. "And I pledge allegiance to my flag, and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." F. Bellamy updated it in 1906 to read, "I pledge allegiance to my flag, and the republic for which it stands. I pledge my head and my heart to God and my country, one language and one flag." Its current form was adopted June 14, 1954. The destruction of the republic continues. The nation's flags. Know your flag. U.S. civil flag of peace, flown only in peacetime on both the land and sea. Used as our U.S. Coast Guard flag, a civil defense organization. U.S. war flag, flown only in time of war on both the land and sea. Designating military property, a ship, base, outpost, fort, or force. U.S. flag of admiralty, flown only when captured by foreign pirates, nations, states, or organizations. Yet it is in every courtroom in United States. The destruction of the Republic continues. The great fraud goes into full swing. 1916, the Supreme Court in Brushaber v. Union Pacific R.R. Company, 240 U.S. 1916, ruled the 16th Amendment, the income tax, did nothing that was not already done, other than to make plain and clear the right of the United States Corp. U.S. to tax corporations and government employees only. 1921, the Shepherd-Towner Maternity Act created the birth registration, or what we now know as the birth certificate. It was known as the Maternity Act and was sold to the American people as a law that would reduce maternal and infant mortality, protect the health of mothers and infants, and for other purposes. One of those other purposes provided for state agencies in overseeing of its operations and expenditures. What it really did was create a federal unbirth registry, which exists today, creating an federal children. This government of parents patriae now legislates for American children as if they are owned by the federal government. The destruction of the Republic continues. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, The New Deal, 1930 to 1934. A second corporation calling itself the United States of America is bankrupted. This time, FDR unlawfully converts the entire population of this country, reinterpreting our trade names on the land to be foreign situs trusts operating in the international jurisdiction of the sea. This allows the creditors of the bankrupt private, mostly foreign-owned, United States of America, Inc., to seize upon the labor and other private property of Americans in gross breach of trust owed to us by the popes and by the British monarch. By this deliberate fraud, we are presumed to be commercial vessels belonging to the bankrupt United States of America, Inc., and by process of extortion and assumpsit, are forced to pay its debts. 1933, Social Security Act, along with the Shepherd-Towner Act. Through your birth certificates you are now issued as a certificate of bond, and everyone gets a number. Bonded and insured. We are also considered a missing, presumed lost at sea, and cestui trusts are established by the municipal United States in our names. These things are operated under deceptive account designations that appear to be our names. 47. John Quincy Public, Jane Ann Public, and so on. The destruction of the Republic continues. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, The New Deal. Your SS is issued, your labor is monetized as property of the federal government. Social Security numbers are issued by the UN through the IMF. The application for a Social Security number is the SS5 form. The Department of the Treasury IMF issues the SS5, not the Social Security Administration. The new SS5 forms do not state who or what publishes them. The earlier SS5 forms state that they are Department of the Treasury forms. You can get a copy of the SS5 you filled out by sending Form SSAL 996 to the SS Administration. 20 CFR, Chapter 111, Subpart B, 422.103. 20 CF. You are undomiciled as a U.S. citizen, and as a permanent resident of a District of Columbia, and as the property of the United States of America, Inc., a corporation, and its subsidiary state of franchises. Under districts, extensions of District of Columbia, such as P97072% equal to the 9th District of Columbia. We were made slaves with all our future labor and earnings, as its assets, and as its security collateral bonded to the international bankers. They registered your birth as a corporation, put your name in all capital letters, a corporate fiction, a U.S. citizen, an entity for them to levy tax, license, fine, sue and charge, and getting you to pay for it by making you believe it's you. U.S. 243. U.S. citizens are human capital. Executive Order, 13,037. The destruction of the Republic continues. The new War Powers Act of 1933 Cont. It suited Roosevelt's plans to seize control of the nation for his socialist agenda, buy and maintain it by executive order. So he accepted the Federal Reserve Board's request, which amended the 1917 War Powers Act, thus giving the President license over all the citizens of this country. Rather than just an enemy, we became the enemy of our country, and remain so to this day. See Black's Law Dictionary 6th edition under Bank Holiday p. 146. Congress returned from its annual recess and rubber-stamped Roosevelt's executive orders, and the federal power grab began. From that day to the present, the United States of America has been under emergency powers. Presidents and the Congress, to maintain and justify the enormous growth in the power of the federal government, have systematically exploited its people. The states cooperated with the federal government because they benefited, right down to the county level, from a massive increase in their revenues and powers. The area over which emergency powers may be declared can cover part of a state, city or county, an entire state, several states, or an entire nation. As is the case today. The destruction of the Republic continues. The new War Powers Act of 1933 Cont. More additional power, characteristics of emergency powers, means any form of military-style government, martial law, or martial rule. Martial law and martial rule are not the same. Note, the term emergency powers is generic, as used herein. Nations declare emergency powers under the doctrine of necessity. When a crisis, war, riots, rebellion, national collapse, etc., occurs that cannot be dealt with in a normal, peaceful manner. This has been the normal manner of dealing with these emergency situations from time immemorial. Emergency powers are supposed to be only a temporary measure to deal with a specific crisis. When the crisis ends, the emergency powers are supposed to end. In the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt declared emergency powers in 1933 that was supposedly to deal with a bank crisis that was in progress. The single most dominant feature of all emergency powers of government is unlawful civil authority. Civil courts cease to exist, being replaced by courts with an appearance of legitimacy, but without the substance. Court process and procedures are a mix of rules from previous lawful courts and military courts. Traffic courts, for example, are courts of summary court-martial, using military rules as applied to civilians. An example of this is seen when defining so-called untraffic infractions. Infraction is not defined in most state codes, but is defined in a manual of courts martial, along with the terms of contempt, and appeal, etc., and in other military sources. Emergency powers government varies in the degree of the emergency declared. The most extreme form is called martial law. The benign, less restrictive form is martial rule. Currently, the U.S. is under the less restrictive form called martial rule. Martial law puts all major resources in an emergency powers area, transportation, food, minerals, metals, communications, etc., under the direct control of the nation's armed forces and its commander-in-chief, the president. A snowstorm of executive orders have been issued already so that in the event the president declares a national emergency, all resources and citizens come under direct control of Federal Emergency Management Agency and the severe martial law form of governance. When he assumed the presidency. Created by the banks intentionally. In fact, The crisis as sold to the president is a figment of the Federal Reserve banker's imagination. The destruction of the republic continues. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, The New Deal. U.S. citizens are slaves and own absolutely nothing, not even what we think are our children. Tillman v. Roberts, 108 So. 62, Van Coten v. Van Coten 154 NE, 146, Senate Document 43 and 73rd Congress First Session. Weinhammer vs. People 13 NY, Rep 378, 481, 1933. All people's gold and silver confiscated under threat of fines and imprisonment. Equal to FRN or fiat and equal to real money. They embezzled all of the gold on deposit in their banks, and were running scared when they thought that by claiming that the American people were hoarding gold, precipitating a banking crisis, they would be off the hook. The Pan-American Treaty of December 26, 1933 49 Stat 3097 Treaty Series 881 - Convention on Rights and Duties of States stated Congress replace statutes with international law, placing all states under international law. The destruction of the Republic continues. The name game, Who Am I? John Quincy, Public, is your private property, and the living soul, living in the Deseret, Oregon state. John Quincy Public is a defunct foreign situs trust and residing in the defunct state of Oregon. John Quincy Public is a testamentary trust, Sestuica v. formed by the District of Columbia municipal government and born in the state of Oregon, but removed to Puerto Rico, where it falls under the laws of the United States of America. Minor. John Q. Public is a new transmitting utility owned and operated by the new Federal Reserve, organized under the auspices of the United Nations Inc. John Q. Public is a state-level transmitting utility operated by the Federal Reserve, doing business as a Corcent United States of America, Inc. The destruction of the Republic continues. The name game, Who Am I? In Senate Document No. 43, under contracts payable in gold. 1933. We read, chattel, and state ultimate ownership of all property once in the state, individual so-called. Ownership is only by virtue of government, that is law, amounting to mere user. And use must be in accordance with law and subordinate to the necessities of the state. The state in this case, refers to the District of Columbia. The District of Columbia is not a state of the Union, but it is a state just as Israel is a state. The District of Columbia is a sovereign jurisdiction unto itself. And so, by the above language we see that government decrees that everything you own is by virtue of government, amounting to mere user. Sounds criminal to me. Does it sound criminal to you? What this means to we Americans is simply this. There are two forms of title. There is legal title and there is equitable title. The government holds legal title to all property, and people hold equitable title, allowing us the use of the item and making us liable for all fees and taxes associated with the use of said item. The destruction of the Republic continues. The name game, Who Am I? In Senate Document Number 43, under contracts payable in gold, 1933, we read, chattel to make the point. New vehicles come with a manufacturer's statement of origin. You never see it. Dealers register this document with the government, providing the government with legal title to the vehicle. With government holding the legal title to the vehicle, then when you purchase the vehicle, you are given only equitable title which allows you use of the vehicle, and makes you responsible to pay all taxes and other fees due, but you are not the legal owner. Ever wonder why your title or registration says, for official use only? Now you know. Remember, you do not own anything in which someone else can make a claim and then confiscate it through court proceedings. The question here is, are American juries going to continue to allow this criminal behavior? If they do, then they condemn their children and grandchildren. I suspect that once they know and understand the criminality of this action, the property seizures and loss of property rights will evaporate like morning dew. To make the point, new vehicles come with a manufacturer's statement of origin. You never see it. Dealers register this document with the government, providing the government with legal title to the vehicle. The destruction of the Republic continues. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, The New Deal. 1935, FDR created the Federal Register Act. It was codified as Title III, Section 301, etc. by executive order. He gave himself the power to create federal agencies, to appoint the heads of those agencies, and to give those agencies the power to tax and regulate all federal citizens. that is U.S. citizens, and because of what appear to be lawful commands on the surface, many citizens, because of their respect for what appears to be law, are cunningly coerced into waiving their rights due to ignorance. U.S. v. Minker, 350 U.S. 179, 187. Tell the powers that be that you are alive and not lost at sea, and claim the Sestuica v. Birth Certificate Trust Account, Title 31 U.S. Code 1321, 1320 seconds, is what we are supposed to do too. Nationality Act, 1940. The destruction of the Republic continues. The usurpation of the law of the land, 1938. Tompkins v. Erie Railroad, the case that changed justice. The U.S. Supreme Court admitted that the federal government acting as a corporation has no such thing as general common law, and is therefore incompetent to fulfill Article 7, not a government of the people, not de jure. The four acts of 1939. All are telltales of how an American born and living on the land of the Tate States have been systematically reduced to living as a U.S. citizen, redefined as corporations and subjects chattel, made to follow the policies, rules, codes and statutes designed for employees of government, defrauded of their property and press-ganged, kidnapped into the foreign jurisdiction of the sea. 1. The Old Age Pension Act. 2. The Buck Act. 3. The Alien Registration Act. 4. The Bar Act. The destruction of the Republic continues. The United Nations. One World Government. 1944. The French create the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and purchased the League of Nations. 1945. The UN Treaty. A replacement for the League of Nations, the organization was established on 24 October 1945 after World War II, in order to prevent another such conflict. Or so was their excuse. At its founding, the United Nations had 51 member states. There are now 193. The headquarters of the UN is in Manhattan, New York City, and experiences extraterritoriality. 10 member states are owned by their treaty, giving them a testamentary title of ownership. December 9, 1945. The International Organization Immunities Act relinquished every public office of United States to the United Nations, as Congress relinquished every public office over to the UN. Local governments, up to the President, fall under UN jurisdiction. Congress gave the UN the right to dictate what laws will be international, and gave them the right to tax the states. The destruction of the Republic continues. The United Nations. One World Government. 1946. The Administrative Procedures ACT. The ACT changed forever the structure and the method for dealing with the people. All towns, cities, counties, states, school districts, policemen, sheriffs, etc. became corporations, and fell under the Administrative Procedures ACT. The federal government would now through the towns, cities, counties, states rule, but the people through rules, regulations, codes, procedures and statutes, color of law, if the sovereign cedes their rights. The town of intent, the city of Sent, the county of Vestenant, the state of intent, are the vehicles used for accomplishing their deeds. The destruction of the Republic continues. The Bar Association, Crown Inc. What is a treaty? A treaty is an agreement under international law entered into by actors in international law, namely sovereign states and international organizations. These forms of agreements are all under international law. 1947 Bars Association Treaty. So, why does the United States Corporation need a treaty with the Bar Association? Answer. Because the Bar Association or British Accreditation Registry is a foreign-owned and controlled entity, a subsidiary of the Crown Inc., a subsidiary of Westminster Inc., ownership of which is held jointly by the Queens of England and Holland, and the Vatican. They are installed by treaty here on our shores to enforce Admiralty law and to protect the interests of the Crown Inc. See Treaty of Ghent, Treaty of Verona, and under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 12(6), the prosecution has failed to provide adequate proof that the parties involved in this situation are actually corporate entities. There is, however, ample proof that the prosecution and other agents are actually corporations. The International Reorganization Rescind Act. Congress put this into form, but they never took action to rescind the act. Fairly recently, an Ohio judge filed suit claiming that Congress did not have the right to relinquish government authority over to the UN, and that the Congressional Act was a constitutional violation, because they didn't put it to the states or the people to agree on it. In 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case, therefore all public offices are under UN jurisdiction, and they are not Americans or U.S. citizens, but foreign agents. Oath of Office, Title 5 U.S.C. 331, 332, 333 backed up by Title 22 CFR Foreign Relations, 92.12, minus 92.31, and Title 8 U.S.C., Section 1481, minus the public official, relinquishes his national citizenship and are thus foreign agents as stipulated under Title 22 U.S.C. Chapter 11 Section 611. Loss of national citizenship minus public officials are no longer U.S. citizens, but rather are foreign agents and must register as such. 1950. The 81st Congress investigated the Lawyers Guild, and determined that the BAR Association is founded and run by communists under definition. Thus any elected official that is a member of the BAR will only be loyal to the BAR and not the people. Attorneys, attorneys, brokers are considered foreign agents under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and are subjects of the Crown Temple BAR. Nearly any state attorney general's website under History of the Attorney General on the State of Illinois website. It is an easy one to find, when they are there to protect the interests of the Crown. The destruction of the Republic continues. The battle against the people. Television. 1953, we finally pay off the 1907 bankruptcy of the United States of America Inc., but instead of returning the land patents owed to the actual states and people, those responsible pretended not to know who the land belonged to, and rolled it all up in giant land trusts, which they continued to tax, lease, rent, and otherwise benefit from in our purported absence. A race for fast knowledge, 1940s to 50s. Television grew popular, and the government was afraid that if private industry had control, then the pieces of the puzzle would be discovered. The FCC was formed by the Communications Act of 1934, which now sought to regulate and subvert it. While the CIA performed many studies of subversion, distraction, subliminal messaging and mind control, using the good old Fifth, they heavily investing in Hollywood. Some fun reads researching this stuff, lol. The destruction of the Republic continues. The battle against the people. The Department of Education. April 11, 1953, government takes control, taking the reins of the educational system away from the states. By promising federal content, under the auspice to improve and propagandize the education minds of our youth. Under the threat of force. Truancy. April 11, 1953. After selling the Date States for nearly 2 years on the idea of a standardized educational system, using Jane Morrow Spalding, a former teacher, as the face of the idea. She lasted less than 2 months, just 49 days, appointed by then-President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Came Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller taking office of Secretary of Education in June 1, 1953. Funny how a family member of one of the world's prominent leading banking families finds it a most important position in government. Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller commented, "Give me just one generation and I'll change the minds and therefore the direction of the world. Some great, some bad." John Fitzgerald Kennedy. January 20, 1961. JFK becomes the 35th President of the United States of America Inc., a private for-profit governmental services corporation. Averted thermonuclear war with Russia, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. He subsequently rejected plans by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to orchestrate false flag attacks on American soil in order to gain public approval for a war. Approved across-the-board top-to-bottom cuts in personal and corporate income taxes to be enacted, and become effective in 1963. Executive Order 110th, issued on June 4, 1963. In 1961, at my direction, sales of silver were suspended by the Secretary of the Treasury. As further steps, I repeal those acts that oblige the Treasury to support the price of silver, and repeal of the special 50% tax on transfers of interest in silver, and give authorization for the Federal Reserve System to issue notes in denominations of $1 so as to make possible the gradual withdrawal of silver certificates from circulation, and the use of the silver thus released for coinage purposes. Then he gave his exposing secret society speech, and was assassinated on 22 November 1963. There's a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman and child. Before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot. President John F. Kennedy, 7 days before his assassination. Operation Northwoods. TheFreeThoughtProject.com. Unclassified in 1997, Operation Northwoods was written up by the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff as a plan to persuade the American people to want to go to war with Cuba by launching a wave of terrorist attacks on U.S. citizens. It called for innocent people to be shot, bombs to be planted in major cities, planes to be hijacked, and it would be blamed on Cuba. Luckily, JFK rejected the plan. But did George Bush? UN Wars and the UN State of Being. 2007 June 1950. The United Nations Security Council authorized the formation and dispatch of UN forces to Korea, to repel what was recognized as a North Korean invasion. 21 countries of the United Nations eventually contributed to the UN force, with the United States providing 88% of the UN's military personnel. 1 November 1955. The United Nations Security Council authorized the formation and dispatch of UN forces to Vietnam, which didn't end until 30 April 1975. Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Zaire, Lebanon, Grenada, Libya, Persian Gulf, Panama, Iraq, Somalia, Haiti, Bosnia, Serbia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Libya. Again, how about the war with ISIL? Operation Inherent Resolve? All wars listed above since 1950 have been United Nations Security Council authorized wars and only against non-United Nations countries. So, you tell me, who runs this nation? Is it we the people? Tell me, is the US military ours? Or is it the United Nations? The UN State of Being? What about our police forces? In all incorporated cities, counties, states and all federal agencies, all police forces are under the policies and direction of the United Nations. All officers have 2 lockers, one with their official uniform, and one with the uniform of the United Nations, and when under state of emergency, can be tasked to represent the UN global interests. Only in the few remaining unincorporated counties is a duly elected county sheriff a de jure elected officer, but is he? When he is voted in by US citizens and not elected American state nationals, one cannot serve 2 masters. Freedom from war. The United States Program for General and Complete Disarmament in a Peaceful World. Department of State Publication, 7277. Disarmament Series 5 released September 1961. Office of Public Services Bureau of Public Affairs. Summary Disarmament Goal and Objectives. The overall goal of the United States is a free, secure and peaceful world of independent states adhering to common standards of justice and international conduct, and subjecting the use of force to the rule of law, a world which has achieved general and complete disarmament under effective international control, and a world in which adjustment to change takes place in accordance with the principles of the United Nations. In order to make possible the achievement of that goal, the program sets forth the following specific objectives toward which nations should direct their efforts. The disbanding of all national armed forces, and the prohibition of their re-establishment in any form whatsoever other than those required to preserve internal order and for contributions to a United Nations peace force. The elimination from national arsenals of all armaments, including all weapons of mass destruction and the means for their delivery, other than those required for a United Nations peace force and for maintaining internal order. The institution of effective means for the enforcement of international agreements, for the settlement of disputes, and for the maintenance of peace in accordance with the principles of the United Nations. The establishment and effective operation of an international disarmament organization within the framework of the United Nations to ensure compliance at all times with all disarmament obligations. Task of negotiating states. The negotiating states are called upon to develop the program into a detailed plan for general and complete disarmament, and to continue their efforts without interruption until the whole program has been achieved. To this end, they are to seek the widest possible area of agreement at the earliest possible date. At the same time, and without prejudice to progress on the disarmament program, they are to seek agreement on those immediate measures that would contribute to the common security of nations, and that could facilitate and form part of the total program. Our government has kept us in a perpetual state of fear, kept us in a continuous stampede of patriotic fervor, with the cry of grave national emergencies. Always there has been some terrible evil to gobble us up if we did not blindly rally behind it by furnishing the exorbitant sums demanded. Yet in retrospect, these disasters seem never to have happened. seem never to have been quite real. I'm General Douglas MacArthur. And there has never been a just war, never an honorable one, on the part of the instigator of the war. I can see 1,000,000 years ahead, and this rule will never change in so many as half a dozen instances. The loud little handful, as usual, will shout for the war. The pulpit will, warily and cautiously, object. At first, the great big dull bulk of the nation will rub its sleepy eyes and try to make out why there should be a war, and will say earnestly and indignantly, "It is unjust and dishonorable, and there is no necessity for it." Then the handful will shout louder. A few fair men on the other side will argue and reason against the war with speech and pen, and at first will have a hearing and be applauded. But it will not last long, those others will outshout them, and presently the anti-war audiences will thin out and lose popularity. Before long you will see this curious thing, the speakers stoned from the platform, and free speech strangled by hordes of furious men who in their secret hearts are still at one with those stoned speakers as earlier, but do not dare say so. And now the whole nation, pulpit and all, will take up the war cry, and shout itself hoarse, and mob any honest man who ventures to open his mouth, and presently such mouths will cease to open. Next the statesman will invent cheap lies, putting the blame upon the nation that is attacked, and every man will be glad of those conscience-soothing falsities, and will diligently study them, and refuse to examine any refutations of them, and thus he will by and by convince himself the war is just, and will thank God for the better sleep he enjoys after this process of grotesque self-deception. And Mark Twain. The UN and US government battle against people. Population control. Roe vs. Wade, the Abortion Act, the killing of the unborn. The Immunization Act, the killing of our children. The Environmental Protection Act, the killing of the weakest. The Weather Control and Manipulation Act. Seriously, folks? Seriously? The Child Protective Services Act, kidnapping of our children for profit and sex trade. The National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, protecting the companies from lawsuits derived from adverse side effects of vaccines. The Farm Act, the FDA Act, the Monsanto Act, the Chemical Act, all to regulate poison, not to eliminate poisons, but to regulate and to demand their use. The UN and US government battle against people. Population control. The Prescription Drug Act, chemical poisons to reduce the elderly and infirmed. Have you seen the side effect warnings? Last year more than 250,000 people dead from prescription drugs. The Affordable Care Act, to regulate and to protect the profits of the healthcare system, to make sure we keep getting sick. The Prison Act, getting the dangerous, the mentally ill, the annoying ones, and the ones who think for themselves and take a stand out of the way for big profits. The largest prison population in the world per capita, by far. The Patriot Act, what's left? The theft of our rights is about over. We are enemies of the state. The NDA Act, US citizens are now not just enemies but are domestic terrorists. The Miller Act, the great extraction of capital. Theft of our trust estates. This is truly how governments are funded. The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. Remain mindful and ever vigilant, and guard with jealous attention your rights and the rights of your loved ones and all people. We must protect ourselves from people whose sole purpose is to take over the world and to enslave the population. An Icelandic police officer explains why his country's police are so nice and rarely have to use violence. Police lögreglun. We jailed or kicked out all the corrupt politicians and bankers, so we don't have to enforce laws made by tyrants. The opposite of what America does. The final pieces. 1999. We finally pay off the 1933 bankruptcy of the United States of America Inc. But instead of returning all the Servitude estate trust assets owed to the living people, Bill Clinton signs Executive Order 13,037. This steps up the conscription process, and pretending that nobody knows who these accounts belong to, hope to seize upon all our property including our names via a claim on abandonment. 2015, President Obama puts the United States Inc. and all its municipal franchises, including the Servitude estates belonging to Americans, into Chapter 7 bankruptcy liquidation. Almost as an afterthought, he puts the USA Inc. into Chapter 11 reorganization. All the municipal government franchises DBA Oregon, Florida, and John Quincy Public. All the territorial government franchises DBA John Quincy Public, 2015, Americans who have become aware of the fraud return to the land jurisdiction of their birth. The new government issues new and sovereign letters patent for the states November 4th, and for the Indian nations, November 6th, and also issues an express trust, and declaration of joint sovereignty. The final pieces. 2017, after extensive due process given to all the principal parties responsible, the liens against all the municipal and territorial government corporations and their franchises are completed and cured, including agricultural liens. January 6, 2017, a private registered indemnity bond covering all the actual states and people is lodged with the United States Treasury, and a payment bond is lodged with the Vatican Chancery Court. June 29, 2017, the American states and people represented by the unincorporated United States of America visit the United States District Court for the District of Columbia and claim back their property and assets as the paramount security interest holders and priority creditors of the bankrupt territorial and municipal government corporations and their franchises worldwide. The final pieces. That all brings us forward to the present moment. Problem: we Americans foreclosed on the territorial and municipal corporations, intending to create a gigantic global version of the public charitable trust that they would then control. However, they were not the creditors. We are, the few Americans. The final pieces. Kant. We are the lawful owners of all that several generations of dishonest employees and middlemen have amassed, and which they have hoped to claim as abandoned property. The success of this scheme would have ended private property rights worldwide. The secondary creditors had already set up a plan to discharge the debts of the municipal franchises in bankruptcy via Treasury direct accounts. This process avoids the fact that these debts are all odious hypothecated debts that the living people never owed in the first place. It also avoids the fact that the living people are the actual paramount security interest holders who have been defrauded in breach of trust, and instead mischaracterizes them as bankrupt as citizens. The final pieces. Kant. As our included public and judicial notice number 4 discloses, citizenship is a form of indentured servitude to the government of a country, and in the modern world, it must be voluntary, proven, and equitable, or it becomes a form of peonage and enslavement outlawed worldwide since 1926. We maintain that the incorporated foreign governmental service corporations operating under color of law and purposeful deceit on our shores since 1868 have effectively enslaved our population and brought insupportable claims against our land and our assets. The proof, the puzzle completion, the beginning and to the end of the One Republic. Foreign Sovereign Immunity Act, Certified Mail Article Number, Common Law Trust Foreign Sovereign Immunity Act defined, Public Notice, Public Record, Maxim of Common Law, a l'impossible nul n'est tenu defined. No one is bound to do what is impossible. I bouve. Inst. N. 601. Foreign Sovereign Immunity. ACT defined subject to existing international agreements, to which the U.S. is a party, and to certain statutorily prescribed exceptions, a foreign nation is immune from the jurisdiction of federal and state courts. 28 U.S.C. S.E. Sig. 1601 to 1611. Black's Law Dictionary 6th edition, page 1396. Whereas defined pursuant to immunity of a foreign state from jurisdiction, subject to existing international agreements to which the United States is a party at the time of enactment of this act, a foreign state shall be immune from the jurisdiction of the courts of the United States and of the states except as provided in sections 1605 to 1607 of this chapter. Whereas defined pursuant to immunity from attachment and execution of property of a foreign state, subject to existing international agreements to which the United States is a party at the time of enactment of this act. The property in the United States of a foreign state shall be immune from attachment, arrest, and execution, except as provided in sections 1610 and 1611 of this chapter. Sovereign people defined, the political body, consisting of the entire number of citizens and qualified electors, who, in their collective capacity, possess the powers of sovereignty and exercise them through their chosen representatives. See Scott v. Sanford, 9400, L. ed. 691. Black's Law Dictionary 6th edition, page 1396. Whereas defined pursuant to Supreme Court annotated statute, Perry v. United States, 294 U.S. 330,353, 1,935. Sovereignty itself is, of course, not subject to law, for it is the author and source of law, but in our system, while sovereign powers are delegated to the agencies of government, sovereignty itself remains with the people, by whom and for whom all government exists and acts, and the law is the definition and limitation of power, for the very idea that one man may be compelled to hold his life, or the means of living, or any material right essential to the enjoyment of life, at the mere will of another, seems to be intolerable in any country where freedom prevails, as being the essence of slavery itself, whereas defined pursuant to Supreme Court annotated statute, Yick Wo v. Hopkins, U.S. 356, 1,886. The Congress cannot revoke the sovereign power of the people to override their will as thus declared, whereas defined pursuant to Supreme Court annotated statute, Cruden v. Neal, N.C. 3,382 seconds. E. 70 from man the state citizen is immune from any and all government attacks and procedure. Dred Scott v. Sanford. U.S. 19 How. 393, or as the Supreme Court has stated clearly, or as every man is independent of all laws, except those prescribed by nature. He is not bound by any institutions formed by his fellow men without his consent. Whereas defined pursuant to Supreme Court annotated statute, 2 Elliott's Debates, 9-4, 2 Bancroft, History of the Constitution, 2. 167, the people themselves have it in their power effectually to resist usurpation, without being driven to an appeal in arms. An act of usurpation is not obligatory, it is not law, and any man may be justified in his resistance. Let him be considered as a criminal by the general government, yet only his fellow citizens can convict him. They are his jury, and if they pronounce him innocent, not all powers of Congress can hurt him, and innocent they certainly will pronounce him, if the supposed law he resisted was an act of usurpation, whereas defined pursuant to Supreme Court annotated statute, Warning v. the Mayor of Savannah, 60 Georgia, p. 93, in this state, as well as in all republics, it is not the legislation, however transcendent its powers, who are supreme but the people, and to suppose that they may violate the fundamental law is, as has been most eloquently expressed, to affirm that the deputy is greater than his principal, that the servant is above his master, that the representatives of the people are superior to the people themselves, that, licensing liberty in no state shall convert a liberty into a license, and charge a fee therefore. Murdoch v. Pennsylvania, 319 U.S. 105. If the state converts a right, liberty into a privilege, the citizen can ignore the license and fee and engage in the right liberty with impunity. Shuttlesworth v. City of Birmingham, Alabama, 373. Without nature of UT that this Citoeffany and law enforcement pers. Ration, drive, YT, infratation. I urge you to inform yourself and your perso as soon as possible. If you would like to be knowledgeable on this subject, please. It has come to my attention that numerous individuals in our state have rescinded all of their contracts with the United States federal government, the state of Arizona, and each of its political subdivisions, establishing themselves as freemen, under the organic national constitution of the Republic of the United States of America. Consequently, they be driving without auto registration, driver's license, or any other evidence of contract, because many law enforcement personnel may be unaware of the contractual nature of auto registration and driver's fensos. It is conceivable that this situation may lead to confrontation between these individuals' fond law enforcement person. In the meantime, inasmuch as this procedure is entirely appropriate when properly carried out, I would 11 key to be personally notified of every such instance of confrontation in order that the persons involved and the public officials involved may be apprised of the correct procedure and the appropriateness of their actions on the part of each concerned. My office phone is 255 to 6261, and are requesting to be notified of the names and incidents along with addresses and phone numbers of participants of any such confrontations, arising from the exercise of a person's freeman status in order to evaluate the outcome of properly rescinded contracts. Sincerely, Wine Stump State Senator. See just who owns you and insures your life. You can now view the entities worldwide that trade on your birth certificate bonds at www.fidelity.com or https www.gmyutility.org/search. In the later, simply type in your hashtag W dashes, or hashtag off your birth certificate in the search bar, magnifying glass. When the list appears, go to bottom of page, and in the box that says, in 15 items per page, use the arrow and change it to 100 per page. They have monetized you. You are a numbered slave. A 14th Amendment U.S. citizen with your own subservient slave identity number, or better known as an SSI. The puzzle pieces. Could we even in our wildest dreams make all this stuff up? Money, bribery, bribe, favor, politics, police, contract money, police embezzlement, organized crime, personal gain politics, police contract, morality, crime, ethics, corrupted, morality, personal gain, embezzlement, illegal government contract, abuse, embezzlement, law, corruption, government, private interest, crime, organized crime, officials, public servant, business, public power, law, extortion, corruption, favoritism, moral impurity, financial benefits, organized crime, bribe, financial benefits, transparency, private interest, morality, officials, corrupt, personal gain, politics, favoritism, corrupt, illegal business, crime, favoritism, government, PT, nepotism, corruption, avor, ILs, public servant law, nepotism, tortion, grant, eBay, illegal interest, oblique power, money, moral impurity, transparency, financial benefits, government. They say they love being